Olyan típusú ember vagy, aki könnyen befolyásolható?
Are you the type of person who can be easily influenced? Are you the type of person who can be easily influenced?
Alkalomhoz illő ruhát választ ki, kérlek.
Please choose a suitable dress for the occasion. Please choose a suitable dress for the occasion.
Egy cserediák program nagyszerű módja a különböző kultúrákkal való megismerkedésnek.
Students' exchange programs are a great way to get acquainted with a different culture. Students' exchange programs are a great way to get acquainted with a different culture.
A mobiltelefon feltalálása óriási mérföldkő volt a kommunikáció fejlődésében.
The invention of mobile phones was a huge milestone in the development of communication. The invention of mobile phones was a huge milestone in the development of communication.
A vitákban történő beszélgetési idő minden csoportban arányosan oszlik meg, azok méretétől függően.
Speaking time in debates is shared out proportionally to every group in accordance with their size. Speaking time in debates is shared out proportionally to every group in accordance with their size.
Azoknak a moziba járóknak, akiket érdekel a második világháború, kihagyhatatlan látnivaló a Hacksaw Ridge.
Hacksaw Ridge is a must-see for moviegoers interested in World War II. Hacksaw Ridge is a must-see for moviegoers interested in World War II.
Az érthetőség kedvéért szeretném, ha megismételnéd, amit az előbb mondtál.
For the sake of clarity, I would like you to repeat what you've just said. For the sake of clarity, I would like you to repeat what you've just said.
Egy szép, 2 méteres karácsonyfa szemkápráztató fényei.
The dazzling lights of a beautiful 2-meter tall Christmas tree. The dazzling lights of a beautiful 2-meter tall Christmas tree.
Az extrém fajtáktól eltekintve, Alex már mindenfajta sportot kipróbált.
Apart from extreme types, Alex has already tried all kinds of sports. Apart from extreme types, Alex has already tried all kinds of sports.
A zseppénz ösztönző a gyerekek számára, hogy jobban teljesítsenek az iskolában.
Pocket money is an incentive for children to perform better at school. Pocket money is an incentive for children to perform better at school.
A polgármester felesége mindent pozitív hozzáállással közelített meg.
The mayor's wife approached everything with a positive attitude. The mayor's wife approached everything with a positive attitude.
Brandonnek teljesen egyedi és modern rálátása volt minden területre, amit megbeszéltünk.
Brandon had an absolutely unique and up-to-date perspective in every area we discussed. Brandon had an absolutely unique and up-to-date perspective in every area we discussed.
A gerendaházak durván 30%-kal csökkentik a fűtésszámlát.
Having a log house reduces heating bills by roughly 30%. Having a log house reduces heating bills by roughly 30%.
A legtöbb sportoló megfelelő táplálkozással és elegendő alvással tartja fenn az energia szintjét.
Most sports people maintain their energy levels by proper nutrition and enough sleep. Most sports people maintain their energy levels by proper nutrition and enough sleep.
A Seychelles-szigeteki tájat kristálytiszta homokos tengerpart jellemzi.
The landscape in the Seychelles is characterized by crystal clear, sandy beaches. The landscape in the Seychelles is characterized by crystal clear, sandy beaches.
Néhány embernek terápiára kell járnia, mert csak nagy nehezen képesek a stresszes helyzeteket kezelni.
Some people need to go to therapy because it is challenging for them to handle stressful situations. Some people need to go to therapy because it is challenging for them to handle stressful situations.
Határozott javulást látok Finley társasági érintkezéseiben.
I can see definite improvement in Finley's social interactions. I can see definite improvement in Finley's social interactions.
Ha nem vállalnánk felelősséget a cselekedeteinkért, könnyen jellemezhetnének minket meggondolatlan egyénekként.
If we didn't take responsibility for our actions, we could be easily characterized as reckless individuals. If we didn't take responsibility for our actions, we could be easily characterized as reckless individuals.
Mivel kerekes székhez van kötve, megpróbálja a fizikai gyengeségeit hatékony szellemi munkával kompenzálni.
Confined to a wheelchair, he tries to compensate his physical shortcomings by doing effective mental work. Confined to a wheelchair, he tries to compensate his physical shortcomings by doing effective mental work.
A szó szoros értelmében úriember.
He is a gentleman in every sense of the word. He is a gentleman in every sense of the word.
Ha Carol nem tudott volna együtt érezni a betegekkel a kórházban, nem lett volna igazán jó nővér.
If Carol hadn't been able to empathize with the patients at the hospital, she wouldn't have been a really good nurse. If Carol hadn't been able to empathize with the patients at the hospital, she wouldn't have been a really good nurse.
A csinos magánnyomozó mélyen elpirult, amikor a miniszterelnök megdicsérte az új frizuráját.
The pretty private investigator blushed deeply after the Prime Minister complimented her on her new hairstyle. The pretty private investigator blushed deeply after the Prime Minister complimented her on her new hairstyle.
Az egyik programozótársa megkérdezte Willt, hogy volt-e már valaha festői szépségű Fidzsin.
One of my fellow computer programmers asked Will if he had ever been to the picturesque Fiji. One of my fellow computer programmers asked Will if he had ever been to the picturesque Fiji.
Nincs oka félni, tiszta a lelkiismerete.
There is no reason for him to be afraid. His conscience is clear. There is no reason for him to be afraid. His conscience is clear.
Az, hogy nem beszél folyékonyan angolul, komoly akadálya lehet annak, hogy babysitteri állást találjon külföldön.
Her lack of speaking fluent English can be a major obstacle in finding a babysitter position abroad. Her lack of speaking fluent English can be a major obstacle in finding a babysitter position abroad.
Ami miatt Reese a legjobban aggódott, vagyis hogy találjon egy rugalmas munkaidejű állást, hamar megoldódott.
What Reese had been mostly concerned about, that is, finding a job with flexible working hours, was shortly resolved. What Reese had been mostly concerned about, that is, finding a job with flexible working hours, was shortly resolved.
Nincs kedvem ma este edzeni, ha nem bánod, inkább befejezném helyette ennek az életrajznak az elolvasását.
I don't feel like exercising tonight. If you don't mind, I'd rather finish reading this biography instead. I don't feel like exercising tonight. If you don't mind, I'd rather finish reading this biography instead.
A sűrű időbeosztású emberek hajlamosak elfelejteni fontos dátumokat, ha csak be nem jegyzik azokat a naptárukba.
People with a busy schedule tend to forget important dates unless they are recorded in their calendar. People with a busy schedule tend to forget important dates unless they are recorded in their calendar.
A menekültek között a nők és a lányok az embercsempészet különösen kiszolgáltatott áldozatainak számítanak.
Women and girl refugees are considered especially vulnerable victims of human trafficking. Women and girl refugees are considered especially vulnerable victims of human trafficking.
Bárcsak elfogadta volna a feltételeinket az a kiemelkedő tehetségű pályázó.
I wish that brilliant applicant had accepted our conditions. I wish that brilliant applicant had accepted our conditions.
Michelle már éppen készült Hollandiába költözni júliusban, amikor váratlanul Madridban találkozott élete szerelmével.
Michelle was about to move to the Netherlands in July when she unexpectedly met the love of her life in Madrid. Michelle was about to move to the Netherlands in July when she unexpectedly met the love of her life in Madrid.
Többé-kevésbé készen vagyunk minden felújítási munkálattal, amelyet az elmúlt pár hónapban végeztünk.
We are more or less ready with all the renovation work that we have been doing for the last few months. We are more or less ready with all the renovation work that we have been doing for the last few months.
Az a sajtdarab hirtelen ihletet adott, hogy mit főzzek a vendégeimnek hétvégén.
That piece of cheese suddenly gave me inspiration about what to cook for my guests at the weekend. That piece of cheese suddenly gave me inspiration about what to cook for my guests at the weekend.
Úgy tűnt, hogy nem számít Helennek a ruha anyagának a minősége.
The quality of the material of the dress didn't seem to matter to Helen. The quality of the material of the dress didn't seem to matter to Helen.
A globalizáció egyfajta szabványosítási folyamatra utal, ami a világon minden embert érint.
Globalization refers to a kind of standardization process which affects all people in the world. Globalization refers to a kind of standardization process which affects all people in the world.
Bármennyire is különbözik az életünk, egyenlőnek lettünk teremtve.
However different our lives are, we have all been created equal. However different our lives are, we have all been created equal.
Amint befordultam abba az elbűvölő, szűk, velencei utcába, rájöttem, hogy már voltam ott korábban.
As I turned into that charming narrow street in Venice, I realized that I had been there earlier. As I turned into that charming narrow street in Venice, I realized that I had been there earlier.
Az elmúlt pár évben ez a környék el lett hanyagolva a helyi tanács szűkös finanszírozása miatt.
This area has been neglected for the last few years due to poor funding from the local council. This area has been neglected for the last few years due to poor funding from the local council.
A parti örök Tossa del Marban figyelmeztettek minket, hogy a tengerpartnak az a része teljesen víz alá került dagálykor.
The coastal guards in Tossa de Mar warned us that that stretch of the beach would be completely underwater at high tide. The coastal guards in Tossa de Mar warned us that that stretch of the beach would be completely underwater at high tide.
Az állatorvos azt mondta nekik, hogy már februárban be kellett volna oltania a kutyát agyhártyagyulladás ellen.
The vet told them that he should have vaccinated their dog against meningitis in February. The vet told them that he should have vaccinated their dog against meningitis in February.
Számos módon reagálhatsz a kritikára, de megsértődni anélkül, hogy szembenéznél a hibáiddal, nem a legjobb közülük.
You can respond to criticism in a variety of ways, but getting offended without facing your shortcomings is not the best one. You can respond to criticism in a variety of ways, but getting offended without facing your shortcomings is not the best one.
A multikulturális közeg önmagában nem probléma, ha a helyi lakosok képesek békésen kezelni annak komplex kérdéseit.
Multiculturalism is not a problem per se if local inhabitants can handle its complex issues in a peaceful manner. Multiculturalism is not a problem per se if local inhabitants can handle its complex issues in a peaceful manner.
Addig nem tudunk beköltözni az új lakásba, amíg az előző tulajdonos el nem viszi minden holmiát.
Until all the belongings of the previous owner are removed, we won't be able to move into the new apartment. Until all the belongings of the previous owner are removed, we won't be able to move into the new apartment.
Néhány bakitól eltekintve a díjátadó ünnepség összességében véve nagy siker volt.
Apart from a few slip-ups, the award ceremony was altogether a great success. Apart from a few slip-ups, the award ceremony was altogether a great success.
A végzős szobatársaim már minden tanulnivaló anyagot gondosan, fontosságuk sorrendje szerint kategóriákba soroltak.
My undergraduate roommates have diligently categorized all the study materials according to their importance. My undergraduate roommates have diligently categorized all the study materials according to their importance.
Jane-nek rossz napja volt, úgyhogy ne vedd magadra a vádaskodásait.
Jane was having a bad day, so don't take her accusations personally. Jane was having a bad day, so don't take her accusations personally.
Szerinted miért a média az egyik leghatékonyabb eszköze önbecsülésünk formálásának?
Why do you think the media is one of the most efficient means of forming our self-esteem? Why do you think the media is one of the most efficient means of forming our self-esteem?
A fiatal brazil világbajnok úszónak sokkal kevesebb időn belül sikerült felépülni a sérüléséből, mint azt várták.
The young Brazilian world champion swimmer was able to recover from his injury in much less time than expected. The young Brazilian world champion swimmer was able to recover from his injury in much less time than expected.
Látszólag kedves gesztus volt Tonytól, hogy bevásárolt az anyukájának, de tudom, hogy sántikál valamiben.
Seemingly, it was a helpful gesture of Tony to do the shopping for his mom, but I know he is up to something. Seemingly, it was a helpful gesture of Tony to do the shopping for his mom, but I know he is up to something.
A globális felmelegedés visszafordíthatatlan következményei között vannak az olvadó jéghegyek, az emelkedő tengerszint, valamint a gyakoribb árvizek és asztályok.
Some irrevocable effects of global warming are melting icebergs, rising sea levels, and more frequent floods and droughts. Some irrevocable effects of global warming are melting icebergs, rising sea levels, and more frequent floods and droughts.
A közhiedelemmel ellentétben White úr azért fizette ki az óvadékot az ügyvédjéért, mert szüksége volt rá a vállalkozásához, nem azért, mert bármiért is tartozott volna neki.
Contrary to general belief, Mr. White bailed out his lawyer because he needed him for his business, not because he owed him anything. Contrary to general belief, Mr. White bailed out his lawyer because he needed him for his business, not because he owed him anything.
Elkerülhetetlen, hogy stresszes időszakokon menj keresztül, ha egy ilyen nagy cégnél dolgozol.
Going through stressful phases is inevitable if you work for a large corporation like that. Going through stressful phases is inevitable if you work for a large corporation like that.
Ez egy olyan fajta kérdés, amit mindig vonakodik megválaszolni, mert inkább szereti elkerülni, ha a bevételéről kell beszélni.
This is a type of question she always hesitates to answer because she prefers to avoid talking about her income. This is a type of question she always hesitates to answer because she prefers to avoid talking about her income.
A veszélyeit figyelmen kívül hagyva, Spencer már egy vagyont költött a szerencsejátékokra.
Ignoring its dangers, Spencer has already spent a fortune on gambling. Ignoring its dangers, Spencer has already spent a fortune on gambling.
Mi az esélye, hogy ma találkozunk az előző amerikai elnökkel itt Washington, D.C.-ben?
What are the odds of our meeting the former president of the USA Today here in Washington, D.C.? What are the odds of our meeting the former president of the USA Today here in Washington, D.C.?
A túlzásba vitt online játék eltorzíthatja a játékosok valóságérzékét.
Excessive online gaming can distort the player's sense of reality. Excessive online gaming can distort the player's sense of reality.
Időbe telhet, míg Bruce rájön, mit is veszített, de idővel meg fogja érteni.
It might take time for Bruce to realize what he has lost, but he will eventually. It might take time for Bruce to realize what he has lost, but he will eventually.
Emily már nem olyan együttérző és önfeláldozó, mint amilyen régen volt.
Emily is not as compassionate and self-sacrificing as she used to be. Emily is not as compassionate and self-sacrificing as she used to be.
A változás Carrie fejlődésében olyan jelentéktelen volt, hogy nem volt érdemes róla beszélni.
The change in Carrie's progress was so insignificant that it wasn't worth talking about. The change in Carrie's progress was so insignificant that it wasn't worth talking about.
Észszerű választás volt új munkahelyet találni, mert a régi főnököd nyilvánvalóan kihasznált.
Finding a new job was a reasonable choice, since you were clearly taken advantage of by your old boss. Finding a new job was a reasonable choice, since you were clearly taken advantage of by your old boss.
Ritkák azok a pillanatok Archie életében, amikor nincs körbevéve emberekkel.
Rare are the moments in Archie's life when he is not surrounded by people. Rare are the moments in Archie's life when he is not surrounded by people.
Jobban tennéd, ha nem okoznál csalódást Cameronnak azzal, hogy elhalasztod a madagaszkári nyaralásotokat.
You had better not disappoint Cameron by postponing your vacation in Madagascar. You had better not disappoint Cameron by postponing your vacation in Madagascar.
Képes leszel nemet mondani minden csábító finomságra a kerti partin?
Will you be able to say no to all the tempting goodies at the garden party? Will you be able to say no to all the tempting goodies at the garden party?
Nehéz Stacyvel együttműködni, mert nem hajlandó elismerni, hogy ő is követel hibákat.
It is difficult to collaborate with Stacy because of her unwillingness to acknowledge that she, too, makes mistakes. It is difficult to collaborate with Stacy because of her unwillingness to acknowledge that she, too, makes mistakes.
A laktózérzékenysége megmagyarázza, hogy miért vonakodik tejtermékeket fogyasztani.
Her lactose intolerance explains her reluctance to consume dairy products. Her lactose intolerance explains her reluctance to consume dairy products.
Bőven van időm július végéig, hogy megtervezzem a konyhám új kinézetét.
I have sufficient time up to the end of July to plan the new design of my kitchen. I have sufficient time up to the end of July to plan the new design of my kitchen.
Nem teljesen világos számomra, hogy most kellene átutalnom a pénzt, vagy akkor kell fizetnem a termékért, amikor kiszállítják.
It's not entirely clear for me whether I should transfer the money now or pay for the product when it's delivered. It's not entirely clear for me whether I should transfer the money now or pay for the product when it's delivered.
Az egészséges zsírok, nyers zöldségek és gyümölcsök fogyasztása különösen elterjedt Dél- és Nyugat-Európában.
The consumption of healthy fats, raw vegetables, and fruits is particularly prevalent in Southern and Western Europe. The consumption of healthy fats, raw vegetables, and fruits is particularly prevalent in Southern and Western Europe.
Harold visszautasította az állásajánlatot, gondolván, hogy a közeljövőben egy jobbat kap.
Harold turned down the job offer, assuming that he would get a better one in the near future. Harold turned down the job offer, assuming that he would get a better one in the near future.
Nos, először is az ötleted nem teljesen eredeti, nekünk pedig el kell kerülnünk a plagizálást.
Well, for one thing, your idea is not entirely original, and we have to avoid plagiarism. Well, for one thing, your idea is not entirely original, and we have to avoid plagiarism.
A mesterségesen előállított vitaminok nagy mennyiségű bevitele nem csak felesleges, hanem potenciálisan káros is.
A high intake of synthetic vitamins is not only unnecessary, but also potentially harmful. A high intake of synthetic vitamins is not only unnecessary, but also potentially harmful.
A napelemek hatékonysága sok tényezőtől függ.
The effectiveness of solar panels depends on many factors. The effectiveness of solar panels depends on many factors.
Mindenhová bérelt biciklivel mentem a majorkai nyaralásom alatt, és így rengeteget spóroltam a közlekedésen.
I rode a rented bicycle everywhere during my holiday in Mallorca, and saved a lot on transportation in this way. I rode a rented bicycle everywhere during my holiday in Mallorca, and saved a lot on transportation in this way.
Az ózonréteg elvékonyodásának megakadályozása érdekében hozott egyik legfontosabb lépés az volt, hogy betiltották a freongázok használatát az aeroszolokban az 1980-as években.
One of the main actions taken against the thinning of the ozone layer was eliminating the use of freon gases in aerosols in the 1980s. One of the main actions taken against the thinning of the ozone layer was eliminating the use of freon gases in aerosols in the 1980s.
A digitális könyvek felhasználóbarátok lehetnek, de nem ugyanazt az élményt nyújtják, amit egy igazi könyv.
Digital books can be user-friendly. However, they do not offer the same experience as real books. Digital books can be user-friendly. However, they do not offer the same experience as real books.
Kevés a valószínűsége a vulkánkitöréseknek ebben a régióban.
There is little likelihood of any volcanic eruptions in this region. There is little likelihood of any volcanic eruptions in this region.
Mivel optimista, mindig a legjobbat feltételezi, még a legrosszabb helyzetekben is.
Being an optimist, she always assumes the best, even in the worst circumstances. Being an optimist, she always assumes the best, even in the worst circumstances.
Újra szeretném kihangsúlyozni minden eddigi megtanult anyag állandó ismétlésének fontosságát.
I would like to emphasize again the importance of constant revision of all the materials having been learnt so far. I would like to emphasize again the importance of constant revision of all the materials having been learnt so far.
Digitális korunk technológiája lehetővé teszi számunkra, hogy az emberiség által felhalmozott minden információhoz hozzáférjünk.
Technology in our digital age makes it possible for us to access all information accumulated by mankind. Technology in our digital age makes it possible for us to access all information accumulated by mankind.
Nyelviskolánkban minden korcsoport hozzá van szokva az általunk használt egyedi tanítási módszerekhez.
All the age groups in our language school are accustomed to the unique learning methods we use. All the age groups in our language school are accustomed to the unique learning methods we use.
Most már csak annyi a dolgunk, hogy feltételezésünket alátámasztjuk elég adattal.
All we have to do now is back up our hypothesis with enough data. All we have to do now is back up our hypothesis with enough data.
Ez az első alkalom, hogy meghívták őket egy zsidó vallás szerinti szertartásra.
This is the first occasion they have ever been invited to a Jewish religious service. This is the first occasion they have ever been invited to a Jewish religious service.
Jenny fél ötre ért a közigazgatási hivatalba, hogy aztán kiderüljön, hogy az már bezárt.
Jenny arrived at the administrative office at 4:30, only to find out that it had been closed already. Jenny arrived at the administrative office at 4:30, only to find out that it had been closed already.
Még nem láttam és tapasztaltam eleget az írvidéki életből ahhoz, hogy cikket tudjak róla írni.
I haven't seen or experienced enough of the Irish country life yet to write an article about it. I haven't seen or experienced enough of the Irish country life yet to write an article about it.
Folyamatosan újszerű ötletekkel áll elő a marketing szemináriumokon.
She keeps bringing up innovative ideas at her marketing seminars. She keeps bringing up innovative ideas at her marketing seminars.
Az egyesület alapítója ezeket az anyagokat azzal a szándékkal írta, hogy a területre érkező új jövevényeket oktassa.
The founder of the association wrote these materials with the intent of educating newcomers to the area. The founder of the association wrote these materials with the intent of educating newcomers to the area.
Hadd kezdjem azzal, hogy megtiszteltetés számomra ennek a csapatnak a tagja lenni.
Let me start by saying that it's an honor to be part of this team. Let me start by saying that it's an honor to be part of this team.
Ha az elméd utat ad a negatív gondolatoknak, azok fogják befolyásolni a cselekedeteidet.
If you let your mind give way to negative thoughts, they will affect your actions. If you let your mind give way to negative thoughts, they will affect your actions.
Sajnálom, hogy tegnap este olyan érzéketlen voltam azokkal a témákkal kapcsolatban, amelyekről beszélgettünk.
I am sorry I was so insensitive last night to the subjects we were talking about. I am sorry I was so insensitive last night to the subjects we were talking about.
A gazdáknak kezdetben szándékukban állt használni mindkét növényvédőszert, de később kiderült, hogy ez felesleges.
The farmers had initially intended to use both pesticides, but later it turned out to be unnecessary. The farmers had initially intended to use both pesticides, but later it turned out to be unnecessary.
Minél magasabb pozíciót töltesz be, annál magasabbak számodra az elvárások, hogy uralkodj az érzéseiden.
The higher the position you fulfill, the higher the expectations for you to control your emotions. The higher the position you fulfill, the higher the expectations for you to control your emotions.
Így vagy úgy, de minden házi munkát be kell fejezni, mielőtt elindulunk Athénba.
One way or another, all the housework must be finished before we leave for Athens. One way or another, all the housework must be finished before we leave for Athens.
A testmozgás akár sport, kertészkedés vagy sziklamászás is legyen az, megnyugtatja az idegeket.
Physical activity, be it sports, gardening, or rock climbing, soothes the nerves. Physical activity, be it sports, gardening, or rock climbing, soothes the nerves.
A szél erejét, mint megújuló energiaforrást használni nem megvalósítható ezen a környéken, mert magas dombok övezik.
Using the power of wind as a renewable energy resource is not viable in this area, since it is surrounded by high hills. Using the power of wind as a renewable energy resource is not viable in this area, since it is surrounded by high hills.
Kétségkívül igaz, hogy Ellen egyik legnagyobb erőssége, hogy elváráson felül motiválja az embereket.
Certainly, it is one of Alan's greatest strengths to motivate people beyond expectations. Certainly, it is one of Alan's greatest strengths to motivate people beyond expectations.
Belga szomszédaink szakembert hívtak a gyümölcsösbe megmetszeni a fákat, attól tartva, hogy ők nem tudnák megfelelően megcsinálni.
Our Belgian neighbors got a professional to prune their trees in the orchard for fear that they wouldn't be able to do it the right way. Our Belgian neighbors got a professional to prune their trees in the orchard for fear that they wouldn't be able to do it the right way.
Budapest jól ismert látványos panorámájáról, kulturális emlékműveiről és élénk éjszakai életéről.
Budapest is renowned for its spectacular panorama, cultural monuments, and vivid nightlife. Budapest is renowned for its spectacular panorama, cultural monuments, and vivid nightlife.
Végül, de nem utolsó sorban szeretnénk, ha a gyerekeink többet vennének részt olyan tevékenységekben, amelyek elősegítik későbbi tudományos karrierjüket.
Last but not least, we want our children to engage more in activities that will advance their future academic career. Last but not least, we want our children to engage more in activities that will advance their future academic career.
Nagyon sok házaspár vonakodik segítséget kérni, amikor kapcsolati problémákról van szó.
A great amount of couples feel reluctant to seek assistance when it comes to relationship issues. A great amount of couples feel reluctant to seek assistance when it comes to relationship issues.
A növényevő állatok kizárólag növényekkel táplálkoznak, míg a mindenevők állatot is fogyasztanak.
Herbivores feed exclusively on plants, while omnivores also consume animals. Herbivores feed exclusively on plants, while omnivores also consume animals.
Napi 8 óra alvás képessé tesz arra, hogy napod maradék kétharmadát hatékonyan hasznosítsd.
Getting 8 hours of sleep every day enables you to make use of the remaining 2/3 of your day effectively. Getting 8 hours of sleep every day enables you to make use of the remaining 2/3 of your day effectively.
Kathleen senkivel sem hajlandó beszélni, akárhogy is próbáljuk meggyőzni.
Kathleen won't talk to anyone, however hard we are trying to convince her. Kathleen won't talk to anyone, however hard we are trying to convince her.
Ez a kísérlet megtanította, hogy hogyan keverjem a vegyi anyagokat, hogy a legjobb eredményt kapjam.
This experiment has taught me how to mix chemicals to get the best outcome. This experiment has taught me how to mix chemicals to get the best outcome.
Ez a két fénykép nem azonos, bármennyire hasonlónak is tűnik.
These two photos aren't identical, however similar they seem to be. These two photos aren't identical, however similar they seem to be.
Amellett, hogy a legtöbb idejét a munkájának szentelte, Jackie eldöntötte, hogy elkezd egy hobbit.
In addition to committing most of her time to work, Jackie decided to take up a hobby. In addition to committing most of her time to work, Jackie decided to take up a hobby.
Nem tudom biztosra mondani, hogy el tudja-e Bob végezni ezt a feladatot ilyen rövid időn belül.
I can't say for sure whether Bob can complete this task in such a short amount of time. I can't say for sure whether Bob can complete this task in such a short amount of time.
Ami a legjobban tetszik ebben a nyári táborban az, hogy a gyerekek anyanyelvi franciákkal társaloghatnak egész héten.
What I like most about this summer camp is that children can converse with native French people during the whole week. What I like most about this summer camp is that children can converse with native French people during the whole week.
A csapatát is motiváló erős víziója nélkül nem lehettek volna sikeresek.
Without his strong vision, which also motivated his team, they wouldn't have been able to succeed. Without his strong vision, which also motivated his team, they wouldn't have been able to succeed.
Lois várta a napot, hogy anyagilag független legyen.
Louis was looking forward to the day he would be independent financially. Louis was looking forward to the day he would be independent financially.
Nagy izgalommal töltött el, amikor meghallottam, hogy a barátom támogatást kapott a kormánytól, hogy beindítsa startup cégét.
I was absolutely thrilled to hear that my friend got funding from the government to launch her startup company. I was absolutely thrilled to hear that my friend got funding from the government to launch her startup company.
Amikor egy nehéz döntéssel nézel szembe, mindig a lehető legjobb megoldásra koncentrálj.
When facing a tough decision, always focus your mind on the best possible solution. When facing a tough decision, always focus your mind on the best possible solution.
Nem mindig logikus, amit mond, de bízom a képességeiben.
It doesn't always make sense what she says, but I trust her abilities. It doesn't always make sense what she says, but I trust her abilities.
Könnyű ebben a sorozatban sok szereplővel azonosulni, mert átlag emberek.
It's easy to identify with many of the characters in this series because they are average people. It's easy to identify with many of the characters in this series because they are average people.
Egyszerre több feladat kezelése már elengedhetetlen a 21. században, ha lépést akarsz tartani a világ új fejleményeivel.
Multitasking is a must in the 21st century if you want to keep up with new advancements in the world. Multitasking is a must in the 21st century if you want to keep up with new advancements in the world.
Egyikőjük sem tudott a kockázatokról, amelyeket ez a fajta sport magában foglal.
Neither of them knew about the risks involved in this kind of sport. Neither of them knew about the risks involved in this kind of sport.
Nóráról bebizonyosodott, hogy valamilyen módon részt vett a bűnügy előkészítésében.
Nora is proved to have participated in some ways in setting up the crime. Nora is proved to have participated in some ways in setting up the crime.
Őszintén szólva, nem ez az első személyzettel kapcsolatos eset, amit mostanában tapasztaltunk.
To be honest, this isn't the first staff-related incident that we have experienced recently. To be honest, this isn't the first staff-related incident that we have experienced recently.
Wilsont és Marilynt rendkívül izgatottá tette a hír, hogy másodszor is nagyszülők lesznek.
Wilson and Marilyn were immensely excited by the news of becoming grandparents for the second time. Wilson and Marilyn were immensely excited by the news of becoming grandparents for the second time.
Azzal, hogy pár évente pozíciót váltasz, betekintést nyerhetsz számos területre, amely máskülönben elérhetetlen lenne számodra.
By changing your position every few years, you can gain insight into several areas that otherwise would be inaccessible for you. By changing your position every few years, you can gain insight into several areas that otherwise would be inaccessible for you.
Amikor börtönék nyaralni mennek, soha nem terveznek előre. Spontán döntik el, hogy hol akarnak megszállni.
When going on holiday, the Burtons never plan ahead. They decide spontaneously where they want to stay. When going on holiday, the Burtons never plan ahead. They decide spontaneously where they want to stay.
Az internetes vásárlás aránya megduplázódott bizonyos országokban az elmúlt 5 év alatt.
The rate of cyber shopping doubled in certain countries in the last 5 years. The rate of cyber shopping doubled in certain countries in the last 5 years.
Az 1980-as évekkel ellentétben, amikor a boltok ételválasztéka nagyon korlátozott volt, manapság a szupermarketek polcai roskadoznak az árutól.
As opposed to the 1980s, when the selection of food in stores was very limited, supermarket shelves today are overloaded with products. As opposed to the 1980s, when the selection of food in stores was very limited, supermarket shelves today are overloaded with products.
Nem gondolom, hogy a nagykövettel való találkozás átlagos esemény volt. Ellenkezőleg, kivételes alkalom volt mindannyiunk számára.
I don't think meeting with the ambassador was ordinary. On the contrary, it was an exceptional occasion for all of us. I don't think meeting with the ambassador was ordinary. On the contrary, it was an exceptional occasion for all of us.
A megjegyzései talán időnként provokatívak voltak, de mindenképpen építőek.
His remarks might have been provocative at times, but they were definitely constructive. His remarks might have been provocative at times, but they were definitely constructive.
Ezek a számok egyértelmű hiányt mutatnak a vendéglátóipar által alkalmazott nők számát tekintve.
These numbers clearly indicate a shortage of women hired by the catering industry. These numbers clearly indicate a shortage of women hired by the catering industry.
Mindig azt a benyomást kelti, hogy nagyon határozott, de én tudom, hogy csak a sebezhetőségét rejti így el.
She always gives the impression of being very decisive, but I know she is simply hiding her vulnerability. She always gives the impression of being very decisive, but I know she is simply hiding her vulnerability.
Romániai tartózkodásuk átmeneti időszak volt, mely hozzásegítette őket, hogy hozzászokjanak az európai életmódhoz.
Their stay in Romania was a time of transition that enabled them to get accustomed to the European way of life. Their stay in Romania was a time of transition that enabled them to get accustomed to the European way of life.
Az eutanázia erkölcsi háttere egy igen vitatott téma.
The moral background of euthanasia is a hotly debated subject. The moral background of euthanasia is a hotly debated subject.
Ilyen értelemben mi is azt mondhatjuk, hogy amit állítanak, nem feltétlenül igaz.
In this sense, we could also say that what they claim is not necessarily true. In this sense, we could also say that what they claim is not necessarily true.
A magas adók csökkentésének példaértékűnek kellene lennie nemzetünk vezetői számára.
Cutting back on high taxes should serve as a precedent for our nation's leaders. Cutting back on high taxes should serve as a precedent for our nation's leaders.
A magazinok kimondottan egy bizonyos közönséget céloznak meg, például háziasszonyokat, az autók szerelmeseit, vagy pénzügyi szakértőket.
Magazines are targeted explicitly at particular audiences, such as homemakers, car lovers, or financial experts. Magazines are targeted explicitly at particular audiences, such as homemakers, car lovers, or financial experts.
Az együttérzés, tolerancia, önzetlenség és empátia megbecsült értékek.
Sympathy, tolerance, selflessness, and empathy are cherished values. Sympathy, tolerance, selflessness, and empathy are cherished values.
Az egyházak világszerte kiemelkedő szerepet játszanak a természeti katasztrófák áldozatainak támogatásában és a szegénység enyhítésében.
Churches all over the world play a prominent role in supporting victims of natural disasters and alleviating poverty. Churches all over the world play a prominent role in supporting victims of natural disasters and alleviating poverty.
A jótékonysági szervezeteknek való adományozás vagy a létminimum alatt élő emberek támogatása természetesnek kellene lennie országunk minden lakosa számára.
Donating to charities or supporting individuals below the poverty line should be natural to all citizens of our country. Donating to charities or supporting individuals below the poverty line should be natural to all citizens of our country.
Az 50 politikai kezdeményezésből megközelítőleg 10 fogadtak el.
Approximately 10 of the 50 political initiations have been approved. Approximately 10 of the 50 political initiations have been approved.
A magasan képzett emberek is szembesülhetnek alkalmanként az elbocsátás kihívásaival.
Highly qualified people may also face the challenges of being laid off at times. Highly qualified people may also face the challenges of being laid off at times.
Csak azért, mert nem tudjuk felfogni a csodákat, nem jelenti azt, hogy nincs rájuk magyarázat.
Simply because we are unable to comprehend miracles, it does not mean that there is no explanation for them. Simply because we are unable to comprehend miracles, it does not mean that there is no explanation for them.
Visszautalva az előzőleg kiadott szakácskönyvemre, Vincent leírt egy vegán ételt, amit abból készített.
Referring back to my previously published cookbook, Vincent described a vegan meal he had made from it. Referring back to my previously published cookbook, Vincent described a vegan meal he had made from it.
Növelhetnénk valamilyen módon az interaktív tanulási tevékenységek számát ebben az óvodában?
Are there any ways we could increase the number of interactive learning activities in this kindergarten? Are there any ways we could increase the number of interactive learning activities in this kindergarten?
Azáltal próbálták visszafizetni minden adósságukat, amivel tartoztak a banknak, hogy eladták az egyik veterán autójukat.
They tried to repay all the debts they owed the bank by way of selling one of their vintage cars. They tried to repay all the debts they owed the bank by way of selling one of their vintage cars.
Szokatlan természeti jelenségek a földkerekségen mindenhol előfordulnak.
Unusual natural phenomena occur everywhere around the globe. Unusual natural phenomena occur everywhere around the globe.
Az orvos figyelmeztette betegét, hogy az alkohol csökkentheti gyógyszerei hatékonyságát.
The doctor warned his patient that alcohol can diminish the efficiency of his medication. The doctor warned his patient that alcohol can diminish the efficiency of his medication.
A szabad nemzetközi kereskedelem mindig is kiváló kilátásokat nyújtott a nagy és kiskereskedőknek, hogy áruikat a saját országaikon kívül értékesítsék.
Free international trade has always offered brilliant prospects for wholesalers and retailers to sell their products outside their own countries. Free international trade has always offered brilliant prospects for wholesalers and retailers to sell their products outside their own countries.
Az interneten való értékesítés viszonylag költséghatékonyabb, mint a szórólapok és más nyomtatott anyagok terjesztése.
Marketing on the internet is comparatively more cost-effective than distributing leaflets and other printed materials. Marketing on the internet is comparatively more cost-effective than distributing leaflets and other printed materials.
A legfelsőbb körökkel való kapcsolatai ellenére a vezérigazgató nem úszta meg szárazon, hogy korrupciós ügybe keveredett.
Despite his connections in high circles, the CEO could not get away with getting mixed up in a corruption case. Despite his connections in high circles, the CEO could not get away with getting mixed up in a corruption case.
Amikor Nicholas el akarja terelni a gondolatait a munkáról, síjárásra megy el a barátjával egy pár órára.
Whenever Nicholas wants to take his mind off work, he goes Nordic walking with his friend for a few hours. Whenever Nicholas wants to take his mind off work, he goes Nordic walking with his friend for a few hours.
Havonta elmennek egy kisebb nyaralásra, hogy feltöltődjenek több heti megerőltető szellemi munkavégzés után.
They go on monthly mini vacations to recharge after doing weeks of strenuous mental work. They go on monthly mini vacations to recharge after doing weeks of strenuous mental work.
Az őssejt levétele a köldökzsinórból rendkívül nagy segítség lehet a genetikai betegségek kezelésében.
Removing blood from the umbilical cord can be tremendously helpful in treating genetic disorders. Removing blood from the umbilical cord can be tremendously helpful in treating genetic disorders.
Sok nyugat-európai hotel, ahol eddig voltak, csúcs technológiával felszerelt volt, ahol nem volt hiány luxusból.
Many of the Western European hotels they have been to so far were high-tech, not lacking any luxury. Many of the Western European hotels they have been to so far were high-tech, not lacking any luxury.
Az iskolai étkeztetés minősége aggodalmakat kelt, és a táplálkozási szakértők sürgetik, hogy több egészséges ételt vezessenek be az étrendekbe.
The quality of school meals raises concerns, and nutritionists urge that more healthy foods be introduced into menus. The quality of school meals raises concerns, and nutritionists urge that more healthy foods be introduced into menus.
Minden erőfeszítés ellenére még legalább 2 hónapba fog telni, mire elkészül az új autópálya.
Despite all the efforts, it will still take at least 2 more months for the new motorway to be ready. Despite all the efforts, it will still take at least 2 more months for the new motorway to be ready.
Elmagyaráztam neki, hogy milyen bizonytalan a helyzetünk, de még mindig nem értette a lényeget.
I explained to him how precarious our situation was, but he was still not getting the point. I explained to him how precarious our situation was, but he was still not getting the point.
Bármilyen terméket is reklámozol, figyelj oda, hogy a termékedet elfogulatlanul, de vonzó módon ismertesd.
Whatever item you advertise, be sure to describe your product objectively, but in an appealing manner. Whatever item you advertise, be sure to describe your product objectively, but in an appealing manner.
A különböző érzelmek az agy más-más területeit aktivizálják, ezért javasolják azt, hogy többféle társasági érintkezésben legyen részünk.
Different emotions activate different areas of your brain, so it is recommended to get involved in multiple social interactions. Different emotions activate different areas of your brain, so it is recommended to get involved in multiple social interactions.
Bár egyik napról a másikra nem tudjuk a korrupciót megállítani, mindig találhatunk módot arra, hogy kordában tartsuk.
Even though we can't stop corruption from one day to another, we can always find ways to keep a check on it. Even though we can't stop corruption from one day to another, we can always find ways to keep a check on it.
Már nagyon vártam, hogy együtt grillezzünk a barátainkkal, de elhalasztották egy váratlan esemény miatt.
I had really been looking forward to barbecuing with our friends, but they put it off due to an unexpected event. I had really been looking forward to barbecuing with our friends, but they put it off due to an unexpected event.
Az egyetemen végzett közgazdászok a lehetőségek széles skálájából választhatnak.
Economists with a university degree have a wide range of opportunities to choose from. Economists with a university degree have a wide range of opportunities to choose from.
Miből gondolod, hogy csak korlátozott számú példány érhető el a könyvesboltban ebből a tankönyvből?
What makes you think that there is only a limited number of copies of this textbook available in the bookstore? What makes you think that there is only a limited number of copies of this textbook available in the bookstore?
Grace-t megérzése élete legjobb döntéséhez vezette.
Grace's intuition led her to the best decision of her life. Grace's intuition led her to the best decision of her life.
Most, hogy már van jogosítványod, akár el is utazhatnál egyedül Törökországba.
Now that you have a driving license, you might as well drive to Turkey alone. Now that you have a driving license, you might as well drive to Turkey alone.
Miért van az, hogy évekig hanyagolt, most meg a legjobb barátom akar lenni?
Why is it that he has been neglecting me for years, and now he wants to become my best friend? Why is it that he has been neglecting me for years, and now he wants to become my best friend?
Nagyon kedvelem a gondolatébresztő könyveket, amelyek elgondolkodtatnak az élet nagy kérdéseiről.
I love thought-provoking books that make me think about the great questions of life. I love thought-provoking books that make me think about the great questions of life.
El sem tudom mondani, mekkora kiváltság volt Jamaikában felnőni.
I can't tell you what a great privilege it was to be growing up in Jamaica. I can't tell you what a great privilege it was to be growing up in Jamaica.
Minél többet gondolkodom azon, amit mondtál, annál jobban értem, mire gondoltál.
The more I think about what you told me, the more I understand what you meant. The more I think about what you told me, the more I understand what you meant.
Cornélia az a fajta ügyvéd, aki mindig legyőzi az akadályokat, még akkor is, amikor nagyon csekélyek az esélyei.
Cornelia is the kind of attorney who always overcomes obstacles, even when all odds are against her. Cornelia is the kind of attorney who always overcomes obstacles, even when all odds are against her.
A hal sült burgonyával már régóta a brit lakosok kedvence, ugyanakkor egy különlegesség az Angliába látogató külföldieknek.
Fish and chips has long been a big favorite of British citizens, but it is a specialty for foreign visitors in England. Fish and chips has long been a big favorite of British citizens, but it is a specialty for foreign visitors in England.
Elméletileg kivitelezhető, de a gyakorlatban jó pár napba is telhet, hogy egy ekkora feladatot teljesítsünk.
In theory, it is doable. However, in practice, it may take quite a few days for us to complete a task this size. In theory, it is doable. However, in practice, it may take quite a few days for us to complete a task this size.
Egyszerűen ostobaság az emberekkel elhitetni azt, hogy ez a termék örökre megszünteti a fejfájásukat.
It is just nonsense to make people believe that this product will eliminate their headaches forever. It is just nonsense to make people believe that this product will eliminate their headaches forever.
A fertőtlenítés bármilyen formája életbevágóan fontos lenne, különösen azokban az országokban, ahol a higiéniai berendezések nem mindenhol elérhetőek.
Any form of disinfection would be of vital importance, especially in countries where sanitary facilities are not available everywhere. Any form of disinfection would be of vital importance, especially in countries where sanitary facilities are not available everywhere.
A kutyák esetében az elszigeteltségtől való félelem azt jelenti, hogy nem jól tolerálják, ha a gazdájuk nélkül vannak.
In case of dogs, separation anxiety means they cannot tolerate being without their owners. In case of dogs, separation anxiety means they cannot tolerate being without their owners.
Nincsenek rá szavak, mennyire sokszínűek Tanzánia etnikai csoportjai.
There are no words to describe the diversity of Tanzania's ethnic groups. There are no words to describe the diversity of Tanzania's ethnic groups.
Ami szépséget láttak Positánóban, még a legvadabb elképzeléseiket is felülmúlta.
What beauty they saw in Positano was far beyond their wildest imagination. What beauty they saw in Positano was far beyond their wildest imagination.
Biztosan van rá észszerű magyarázat, miért olyan feledékeny állandóan.
There is clearly an underlying cause behind his being forgetful all the time. There is clearly an underlying cause behind his being forgetful all the time.
Tekintve mindent, amin keresztül ment, nem meglepő, hogy Brett nem fogja tudni felügyelni a Frankfurtban zajló építkezési munkákat.
Given everything he has gone through, it's not surprising that Bratt is not going to be able to oversee the ongoing construction work in Frankfurt. Given everything he has gone through, it's not surprising that Bratt is not going to be able to oversee the ongoing construction work in Frankfurt.
Teljesen kiment a fejemből, hogy lejárt az útlevelem, ezért sürgősen újat kellett csináltatnom.
It completely slipped my mind that my passport had expired, so I had to have a new one made in a rush. It completely slipped my mind that my passport had expired, so I had to have a new one made in a rush.
Erősen kétlem, hogy mindent sikerül megértenem ebből a filmből az alapszintű kínai tudásommal.
I highly doubt that I will manage to understand everything in this movie with my basic level Chinese knowledge. I highly doubt that I will manage to understand everything in this movie with my basic level Chinese knowledge.
Egy dolog biztos, ha összetett mondatokat akarsz alkotni, annyi kiegészítő információt kell használnod bennük, amennyit csak tudsz.
One thing is for sure. If you want to form complex sentences, you will have to use as much additional information in them as you can. One thing is for sure. If you want to form complex sentences, you will have to use as much additional information in them as you can.
Jelenleg nincs olyan kiadó lakás, amiről tudnék.
There is no apartment for rent that I know of at the moment. There is no apartment for rent that I know of at the moment.
A lényeg az, hogy ha egy üzleti diplomát akarsz szerezni, először egy alapszakos képzésre van szükséged.
The bottom line is that if you want to do an MBA, Master of Business Administration, you will first need to obtain a bachelor's degree. The bottom line is that if you want to do an MBA, Master of Business Administration, you will first need to obtain a bachelor's degree.
Ilyen típusú munkát még soha nem végeztünk, ezért egy jól működő stratégiára van szükségünk.
We have never done this type of job before. Therefore, we need a well-functioning strategy. We have never done this type of job before. Therefore, we need a well-functioning strategy.
A szavak betűkből állnak, és minden írott szöveg alapvető építőkövei.
Letters make up words, and words are the basic building blocks of any written text. Letters make up words, and words are the basic building blocks of any written text.
A zöld turmixok a 21. század első számú szuperételeivé váltak.
Green smoothies have become the quintessential superfoods of the 21st century. Green smoothies have become the quintessential superfoods of the 21st century.
A történet egy szép nyári napon kezdődik, tipikusan angol falusi környezetben, valamikor a 19. század végén.
The story begins on a beautiful summer day in a quintessentially English rural setting, sometime around the end of the 19th century. The story begins on a beautiful summer day in a quintessentially English rural setting, sometime around the end of the 19th century.
Nagyon szeretem művészek, tudósok és politikusok életrajzát olvasni, akik nem csak civilizációnkat változtatták meg, hanem példaértékű életet is éltek.
I love reading biographies of artists, scientists, and politicians who not only changed our civilization, but also led an exemplary life. I love reading biographies of artists, scientists, and politicians who not only changed our civilization, but also led an exemplary life.
Bármilyen hihetetlennek is tűnik, úgy néz ki, hogy nyertem egy tekintélyes pénzösszeget a lottón.
However absurd it might seem, it looks like I've won a considerable amount of money on the lottery. However absurd it might seem, it looks like I've won a considerable amount of money on the lottery.
Évente újítom meg az előfizetésemet erre a barkács magazinra.
I renew my subscription for this DIY magazine annually. I renew my subscription for this DIY magazine annually.
Ha esetleg magasabbra emelkednek a költségek ennél az összegnél, hívj bizalommal.
Should the costs rise higher than this amount, don't hesitate to call me. Should the costs rise higher than this amount, don't hesitate to call me.
A temperamentumából ítélve ez a nő biztosan olasz vagy spanyol.
Judging by her temperament, this woman must either be Italian or Spanish. Judging by her temperament, this woman must either be Italian or Spanish.
Az elméd hihetetlenül hatékony eszköz, mely képes a negatív érzelmeidet féken tartani, de rajtad áll, hogy megtanulod-e használni.
Your mind is an incredibly powerful tool that is able to control your negative feelings, but it's up to you whether you learn to use it. Your mind is an incredibly powerful tool that is able to control your negative feelings, but it's up to you whether you learn to use it.
Reakcióink ugyanazokra a külső ingerekre egyénenként változnak.
Our reaction to the same outside stimuli varies individually. Our reaction to the same outside stimuli varies individually.
Logan ösztönösen megérez dolgokat, és okos, ezért választanám őt, hogy segítsen nekem az állatkerti állatok gondozásában.
Logan is intuitive and smart. That is why I would choose him to help me care for the animals in the zoo. Logan is intuitive and smart. That is why I would choose him to help me care for the animals in the zoo.
Ennek a fajta küzdősport végzésének az előnyei messze meghaladják majd a hátrányait.
The benefits you can gain from doing this type of combat sport will far outweigh its drawbacks. The benefits you can gain from doing this type of combat sport will far outweigh its drawbacks.
Az emberi történelem legbefolyásosabb emberei közül a legtöbb óriási áldozatokat hozott, hogy változást hozzon a világba.
Some of the most influential people in human history have made huge sacrifices to make a difference in this world. Some of the most influential people in human history have made huge sacrifices to make a difference in this world.
Az a tiszta gondolkodás és éles eszűség, ami Margaret D. nagymamámat jellemzi, meghazudtolja a korát.
The mental clarity and wittiness my great-grandmother Margaret displays belies her age. The mental clarity and wittiness my great-grandmother Margaret displays belies her age.
A megelégedettség és türelem ritka tulajdonságok ma.
Contentment and patience are rare qualities today. Contentment and patience are rare qualities today.
Isabella kedvesen és udvariasan visszautasította a Rómeó és Júliában való főszerepet, mert már felajánlottak neki egy sokkal kedvezőbb szerepet a Broadwayen.
Isabella kindly and politely refused to take the lead role in Romeo and Juliet because she had already been offered a much more suitable role on Broadway. Isabella kindly and politely refused to take the lead role in Romeo and Juliet because she had already been offered a much more suitable role on Broadway.
Azt akarod, hogy a webdesigner már csütörtök reggelre készen legyen a tervekkel?
Do you want the web designer to be finished with the plans by Thursday morning? Do you want the web designer to be finished with the plans by Thursday morning?
Nem akartam őt felzaklatni, ő volt az, aki kérdezte a véleményemet.
I didn't mean to upset him. He was the one who asked for my opinion. I didn't mean to upset him. He was the one who asked for my opinion.
Éreztem, hogy valaki finoman megérintette a vállamat.
I could feel somebody touching my shoulder gently. I could feel somebody touching my shoulder gently.
Amit a rendőrség épp be akar vezetni, lehet, hogy éppen megbonyolítja a sofőrök helyzetét.
What the police are about to introduce might actually complicate the situation of drivers. What the police are about to introduce might actually complicate the situation of drivers.
Ha szeretsz új ételekkel kísérletezni, hadd javasoljam ezt a simit receptet, amelyet nemrég fedeztem fel.
If you like experimenting with new foods, let me recommend you this simit recipe I've recently discovered. If you like experimenting with new foods, let me recommend you this simit recipe I've recently discovered.
A simit egy finom, édes, bagelszerű görög nemzeti étel szezámmagba forgatva.
Simit is a delicious, sweet, bagel-like Greek national food covered with sesame seeds. Simit is a delicious, sweet, bagel-like Greek national food covered with sesame seeds.
Pólt kerestem, de mindenkivel találkoztam, kivéve őt.
I was trying to find Paul. However, I met everybody except him. I was trying to find Paul. However, I met everybody except him.
Mindig is magával ragadott a látvány, amit a felhők fölötti repülés közben lehet látni.
I have always been captivated by the view I can see when flying above the clouds. I have always been captivated by the view I can see when flying above the clouds.
Azt gondolták, már soha nem lesz lehetőségük újra elmenni Alaszkába, így megragadták az alkalmat, és még egy hétig Fairbanksben maradtak.
They thought they would never have the chance to see Alaska again, so they took the opportunity and stayed for one more week in Fairbanks. They thought they would never have the chance to see Alaska again, so they took the opportunity and stayed for one more week in Fairbanks.
Mindent figyelembe véve azt mondanám, hogy a hibrid autók használata elég gyakori a fejlettebb európai országokban.
All things considered, I would say that the use of hybrid cars is fairly common in the more developed European countries. All things considered, I would say that the use of hybrid cars is fairly common in the more developed European countries.
Az én időmben nem utaztunk ilyen sokat.
We didn't used to travel so much in my days. We didn't used to travel so much in my days.
Az ezredfordulós generáció teljesítményorientált, tele kreatív ötletekkel és korlátlan kilátásokkal az álmaik megvalósításához.
Generation Z is achievement-oriented and full of creative ideas and unlimited prospects to fulfill their dreams. Generation Z is achievement-oriented and full of creative ideas and unlimited prospects to fulfill their dreams.
Az anyagi jólét megnyilvánulhat egy egészségesebb életstílushoz való hozzáférésben és a gyerekek számára jobb iskoláztatási lehetőségekben.
Financial prosperity can manifest itself in access to a healthier lifestyle and better schooling opportunities for children. Financial prosperity can manifest itself in access to a healthier lifestyle and better schooling opportunities for children.
Egy közös dolog van ezekben a fajokban. Több napig megvannak víz nélkül.
These species have one thing in common. They can do without water for several days. These species have one thing in common. They can do without water for several days.
Valami okból kifolyólag nem voltak hajlandóak megadni azt az információt, amire sürgősen szükségem volt.
For some reason, they would not give me the information I urgently needed. For some reason, they would not give me the information I urgently needed.
A belépés ingyenes lesz a fiú kórus templomban tartandó előadására.
Admission to the performance of the boys' choir at the church will be free of charge. Admission to the performance of the boys' choir at the church will be free of charge.
Jensen neveltetése nem engedte, hogy átlépje a tisztességesség határát.
Jensen's upbringing prevented him from crossing the line of decency. Jensen's upbringing prevented him from crossing the line of decency.
Nem akarok következtetést levonni, amíg nem hallom a történet mindkét oldalát.
I don't want to draw a conclusion until I have heard both sides of the story. I don't want to draw a conclusion until I have heard both sides of the story.
Ha egy csoportban tanulsz, túl sok zavaró tényező lehet, ami nehézzé teszi számodra a koncentrálást.
If you study in a group, there can be too many distractions, which makes it hard for you to concentrate. If you study in a group, there can be too many distractions, which makes it hard for you to concentrate.
Az első pillanattól kezdve tudtam, hogy Leslie lesz a férjem.
I knew from the first moment that Leslie would be my husband. I knew from the first moment that Leslie would be my husband.
Sokkal hatékonyabb vagyok a munkámban, ha egyedül dolgozom.
I am much more efficient at my job if I work on my own. I am much more efficient at my job if I work on my own.
Amikor Bryant áthelyezték egy másik részlegre, befejezetlenül hagyta a jelentését, így nekem kellett elkészítenem.
When Brian was relocated to another department, he left his report unfinished, so I had to prepare it. When Brian was relocated to another department, he left his report unfinished, so I had to prepare it.
Humanitárius szervezetekkel dolgoztam, így egy idő után profi módon tudtam az embereket rábeszélni arra, hogy adakozzanak.
I worked with humanitarian organizations, so after a while I became an expert on how to persuade people to donate. I worked with humanitarian organizations, so after a while I became an expert on how to persuade people to donate.
Az önkéntes programok nagyszerű eszközök a fiataloknak, hogy kiszélesítsék a látókörüket a világról.
Volunteer programs are a great means for young people to widen their horizons about the world. Volunteer programs are a great means for young people to widen their horizons about the world.
A beteg gyerekekről való gondoskodás Kenyában ugródeszka volt Watson számára, hogy gyermekorvos lehessen.
Taking care of sick children in Kenya was a stepping stone for Watson to becoming a pediatrician. Taking care of sick children in Kenya was a stepping stone for Watson to becoming a pediatrician.
A Princeton Egyetemre való bejutás utat nyitott számára, hogy pszichológusként 5 évvel később saját praxist nyisson.
Getting into Princeton paved the way for her to open her own practice as a psychologist 5 years later. Getting into Princeton paved the way for her to open her own practice as a psychologist 5 years later.
Radikális változásra van szükség a rákkutatás területén, de sok időbe telik és sok türelmet igényel.
There is a need for radical change in the field of cancer research, but it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of patience. There is a need for radical change in the field of cancer research, but it takes a lot of time and requires a lot of patience.
Bárcsak tudnék bármikor improvizálni, amikor nincs időm előre felkészülni.
I wish I could improvise any time I don't have time to prepare in advance. I wish I could improvise any time I don't have time to prepare in advance.
Nem volt tudatában annak, hogy a szorgalma volt az egyetlen ok, amiért abban a pozícióban volt.
She wasn't aware of the fact that the only reason she was in that position was her diligence. She wasn't aware of the fact that the only reason she was in that position was her diligence.
A kipufogó gázoknak nem volna szabad egy bizonyos szint fölötti nehézfém koncentrációt tartalmazni.
Exhaustion gases should not contain heavy metal concentration above a certain level. Exhaustion gases should not contain heavy metal concentration above a certain level.
Camille mellettem maradt, míg én idegesen vártam a laborvizsgálatom eredményét.
Camille kept me company while I was nervously waiting for my blood test results. Camille kept me company while I was nervously waiting for my blood test results.
Minden emberrel ugyanúgy bánok, függetlenül a koruktól, nemüktől vagy társadalmi helyzetüktől.
I treat all people the same way, regardless of their age, sex, or social standing. I treat all people the same way, regardless of their age, sex, or social standing.
Connor jó nagybácsi, de még annál is jobb férj, aki tökéletesen gondoskodik a feleségéről.
Connor is a good uncle, but an even better husband who takes perfect care of his wife. Connor is a good uncle, but an even better husband who takes perfect care of his wife.
Tűzd ki magadnak valós és elérhető célokat minden héten, és jutalmazd meg magad, amikor elérted őket.
Set yourself realistic and achievable goals every week and reward yourself when you reach them. Set yourself realistic and achievable goals every week and reward yourself when you reach them.
Hajlamos vagyok rá, hogy kétszer is ellenőrzöm, hogy kikapcsoltam a tűzhelyet, mielőtt elindulunk nyaralni.
I have a tendency to check whether the cooker is off 2 times before we leave for our holiday. I have a tendency to check whether the cooker is off 2 times before we leave for our holiday.
A kovásszal készült pékáruk tele vannak hasznos baktériumokkal, amelyek fantasztikus hatással vannak az emésztésedre.
Bakery products prepared with sourdough are loaded with beneficial bacteria, which have an amazing effect on your digestion. Bakery products prepared with sourdough are loaded with beneficial bacteria, which have an amazing effect on your digestion.
Ezt tapasztalatból mondom.
I'm telling you this from experience. I'm telling you this from experience.
Sok ember számára kérdéses, hogy az abortusz erkölcsileg helyese vagy helytelene.
For many people, it is arguable whether abortion is morally right or wrong. For many people, it is arguable whether abortion is morally right or wrong.
Életemben először úgy érzem, hogy valami értelmes és örömteli dolgot csinálok.
For the first time in my life, I feel I am doing something meaningful and gratifying. For the first time in my life, I feel I am doing something meaningful and gratifying.
Az elmúlt évek folyamán már hozzászoktam Izland dermesztően hideg éghajlatához.
I have got used to Iceland's freezing cold climate over the last few years. I have got used to Iceland's freezing cold climate over the last few years.
A kutatások szerint a hormonális változások felelősek a tizenévesek furcsa viselkedéséért.
According to research, hormonal changes are responsible for adolescents' awkward behavior. According to research, hormonal changes are responsible for adolescents' awkward behavior.
Ha kreatív munkából élsz, nem csak hogy bevételhez juthatsz és a mások életét jobbá teheted, hanem az önbizalmadat is növelheted.
Doing something creative for a living can not only earn you money and make others' lives better, but can also boost your self-confidence. Doing something creative for a living can not only earn you money and make others' lives better, but can also boost your self-confidence.
A fájdalmas élmények megtapasztalása ellenállóbb személyiségekké tesz minket.
Going through painful experiences in life makes us more resilient individuals. Going through painful experiences in life makes us more resilient individuals.
Minden esetre több mint 50% esély van rá, hogy első nekifutásra átmegy a vizsgán.
Anyway, there is more than a 50% chance that she will pass the exam on the first try. Anyway, there is more than a 50% chance that she will pass the exam on the first try.
Ha megtanulod helyesen kezelni az építő jellegű kritikát, sokkal élvezetesebbnek fogod találni a másokkal való együttműködést.
If you learn to handle constructive criticism correctly, you will find cooperation with others much more enjoyable. If you learn to handle constructive criticism correctly, you will find cooperation with others much more enjoyable.
Ha nem akarsz megint kifogásokat hozni, egyszerűen tedd meg, amit meg kell tenned.
If you don't want to bring up excuses again, simply do what you need to do. If you don't want to bring up excuses again, simply do what you need to do.
Még akkor is, ha feltételezzük, hogy jó szándék vezette, amikor mindenkinek elmondta a kockázatos tervedet, a tény az, hogy visszaélt a bizalmaddal.
Even if he had, hypothetically speaking, good intentions when telling everyone about your risky plan, the fact remains that he betrayed your trust. Even if he had, hypothetically speaking, good intentions when telling everyone about your risky plan, the fact remains that he betrayed your trust.
Rá kellett volna keresnem erre a cégre, mielőtt elfogadtam az ajánlatukat. Jól ismert csalók.
I should have Googled this company before I accepted their offer. They are well-known scammers. I should have Googled this company before I accepted their offer. They are well-known scammers.
Különösen igaz, amit mondasz a mai tévéreklámokat tekintve.
What you are saying is particularly true regarding today's commercials. What you are saying is particularly true regarding today's commercials.
A legtöbb apa azt szeretné, hogy a fia a nyomdokaiba lépjen, és egy nap átvegye az üzletét.
Most fathers want their sons to step in their footsteps and take over their business one day. Most fathers want their sons to step in their footsteps and take over their business one day.
A járványok nehezen leküzdhetők a baktériumok antibiotikumokkal szemben tanúsított, egyre erősödő ellenállása miatt.
Epidemics are difficult to fight because of bacteria's ever-growing resistance to antibiotics. Epidemics are difficult to fight because of bacteria's ever-growing resistance to antibiotics.
A szellemi leépülés egyik leggyakoribb formája az Alzheimer-kór.
Alzheimer's is one of the most widespread forms of dementia. Alzheimer's is one of the most widespread forms of dementia.
Fejlett országokban a legtöbb általános és középiskola interaktív táblákkal van felszerelve, hogy a tanítási módszerek fejlődését elősegítsék.
Most primary and secondary schools in industrialized countries are equipped with smartboards to facilitate the development of teaching methods. Most primary and secondary schools in industrialized countries are equipped with smartboards to facilitate the development of teaching methods.
Ha nem szereted a tiramisút, mert túl tömény, választhatsz egy könnyebb desszertet.
If you don't like tiramisu because it is too heavy for you, you can opt for a lighter dessert. If you don't like tiramisu because it is too heavy for you, you can opt for a lighter dessert.
Kérlek, azonnal tudasd velem, ha a tervünk elvárt eredményeitől bármiféle eltérést tapasztalsz.
Please inform me immediately if you experience any deviation from the expected outcome of our plan. Please inform me immediately if you experience any deviation from the expected outcome of our plan.
Lehetetlennek bizonyult Jared számára, hogy abba hagyja a túlköltekezést, így egy izgalmas hobbit választott, ami lefoglalta a szabadidejét.
It proved impossible for Jarrett to break his habit of overspending, so he chose an exciting hobby which occupied his free time. It proved impossible for Jarrett to break his habit of overspending, so he chose an exciting hobby which occupied his free time.
Ha úgy gondolsz a főiskolára, mint egy kivételes lehetőségre, ami nem mindenkinek adatik meg, akkor könnyebb lesz elkezdened az ottani tanulmányaidat.
If you think of going to college as an exceptional opportunity not provided to everyone, it will be easier for you to start your studies there. If you think of going to college as an exceptional opportunity not provided to everyone, it will be easier for you to start your studies there.
Még soha senki nem látta Lizát sírni vagy bosszankodni, mert hihetetlenül ügyes az érzelmei elrejtésében.
No one has ever seen Lisa cry or get upset because she is amazingly adept at hiding her emotions. No one has ever seen Lisa cry or get upset because she is amazingly adept at hiding her emotions.
Néha túlságosan elfoglaltak vagyunk a saját gondolatainkkal, hogy mások szükségleteit észrevegyük.
Sometimes we are too preoccupied with our own thoughts to notice others' needs. Sometimes we are too preoccupied with our own thoughts to notice others' needs.
Az anyagok, amelyeket eddig összegyűjtöttél, már nem aktuálisak az esettanulmányunkhoz.
The materials that you have collected are not relevant to our case study anymore. The materials that you have collected are not relevant to our case study anymore.
Az embereket mindig lenyűgözi magasan képzett fordítóink szakértelme.
People are always impressed by the expertise of our highly trained interpreters. People are always impressed by the expertise of our highly trained interpreters.
Kifejtenéd kérlek részletesen, amit az imént a magyar borokkal kapcsolatban mondtál?
Would you please elaborate on what you have just said about Hungarian wines? Would you please elaborate on what you have just said about Hungarian wines?
Jó okuk van reménykedni a jövőt illetően, mivel megvan minden dokumentumuk, ami bizonyítja, hogy bevándorlókként törvényesen maradhatnak Németországban.
They have good grounds to be optimistic about the future, since they have all the documents which prove that they can stay legally in Germany as migrants. They have good grounds to be optimistic about the future, since they have all the documents which prove that they can stay legally in Germany as migrants.
A jógára a legtöbb azt gyakorló úgy tekint, mint a fizikai állóképesség fejlesztésének és a belső béke elérésének eszközére.
Yoga is considered by most exercisers as a means of enhancing physical fitness and reaching inner peace. Yoga is considered by most exercisers as a means of enhancing physical fitness and reaching inner peace.
Épp úgy, ahogy a súlyemelés formába hoz, ugyanúgy a megfelelő étrend is.
Just as weightlifting will get you in shape, so will a proper diet too. Just as weightlifting will get you in shape, so will a proper diet too.
A gyógyfürdők, élményparkok, állatkertek vagy akár a hegymászás mind a turizmus szerves részei.
Spas, theme parks, zoos, or just hiking in the mountains are all integral parts of tourism everywhere. Spas, theme parks, zoos, or just hiking in the mountains are all integral parts of tourism everywhere.
Számomra vidéken élni vonzóbb, mint egy túlzsúfolt városban.
As for me, living in the countryside is preferable to living in an overcrowded city. As for me, living in the countryside is preferable to living in an overcrowded city.
Kétségkívül az idei angoltábor volt az eddigi legemlékezetesebb.
The English camp this year has been, without doubt, the most memorable one we have had so far. The English camp this year has been, without doubt, the most memorable one we have had so far.
Mérhetetlenül sokat változtak ahhoz képest, hogy milyenek voltak 20 évvel ezelőtt.
They have changed immeasurably compared to what they were like 20 years ago. They have changed immeasurably compared to what they were like 20 years ago.
Az oltások eredményeképpen egyre kevesebb embert diagnosztizálnak fertőző betegségekkel.
As a result of vaccination, fewer and fewer people are diagnosed with infectious diseases. As a result of vaccination, fewer and fewer people are diagnosed with infectious diseases.
A műtrágyák túlzott használata nehézzé teszi a fogyasztók számára, hogy jó minőségű biotermékeket találjanak a boltok polcain.
Extensive use of fertilizers makes it difficult for consumers to find high-quality organic products on the shelves of stores. Extensive use of fertilizers makes it difficult for consumers to find high-quality organic products on the shelves of stores.
16 éves korban csak a szüleid beleegyezésével vezethetsz autót az USA-ban.
At the age of 16, you are only permitted to drive a car in the USA with your parents' consent. At the age of 16, you are only permitted to drive a car in the USA with your parents' consent.
Az internet mostanra már eljutott az élet szinte minden területére.
The internet has found its way into almost all areas of life by now. The internet has found its way into almost all areas of life by now.
Képes volt hosszú mérföldeket futni minden erőfeszítés nélkül, mielőtt megoperálták a lábát.
He used to run effortlessly for miles and miles before his leg was operated on. He used to run effortlessly for miles and miles before his leg was operated on.
Elkötelezettsége a hulladék csökkentésének ügye iránt a helyi környezetvédők kiemelkedő személyiségévé tette.
Her dedication to the cause of reducing waste made her an outstanding figure among local environmentalists. Her dedication to the cause of reducing waste made her an outstanding figure among local environmentalists.
A cégek a közösségi médiában való reklámozást, mint meglévő ügyfélkörük szélesítésének eszközét használják.
Companies use social media advertisement as a way of expanding their existing client base. Companies use social media advertisement as a way of expanding their existing client base.
Annyira kimerültnek érezték magukat érzelmileg és szellemileg, hogy itt volt az ideje abba hagyni a munkát és elindulni a Galapagos-szigetekre.
They felt so drained emotionally and mentally that it was time for them to stop working and leave for the Galapagos Islands. They felt so drained emotionally and mentally that it was time for them to stop working and leave for the Galapagos Islands.
A szelektív hulladékgyűjtés kivételével ma már a napirend minden témáját érintettük.
With the exception of selective waste collection, we have covered every topic on the agenda today. With the exception of selective waste collection, we have covered every topic on the agenda today.
A mesterséges intelligencia valószínűleg a legtöbb ma még ember által végzett munkát átveszi a nagyon közeli jövőben.
Artificial intelligence will probably take over most jobs currently done by humans in the very near future. Artificial intelligence will probably take over most jobs currently done by humans in the very near future.
Nagyon elfoglalt voltam múltkor este, ahogy készültem a sógornőm babaváró bulijára.
I was very busy the other night preparing for the baby shower for my sister-in-law. I was very busy the other night preparing for the baby shower for my sister-in-law.
Azért beszélek elég jól franciául, mert egy ideig Montrealban éltünk.
I speak fairly good French because we were living in Montreal for a while. I speak fairly good French because we were living in Montreal for a while.
Nem volt szándékomban elmenni a kortárs művészeti kiállításra, de a barátaim azt mondták, nem bánom meg, ha csatlakozom hozzájuk.
I had no intention of going to the contemporary art exhibition, but my friends told me I would not regret it if I joined them. I had no intention of going to the contemporary art exhibition, but my friends told me I would not regret it if I joined them.
Egymásnak ellentmondó történeteket hallottunk a betörést követően azzal kapcsolatban, hogy pontosan mekkora értéket képviseltek az ellopott tárgyak.
We heard contradictory stories after the burglary as to the exact value of the stolen objects. We heard contradictory stories after the burglary as to the exact value of the stolen objects.
Kénytelenek voltak elhagyni az otthonukat a földrengés után, mert a hivatalos szervek elkezdték kiüríteni az egész területet.
They were compelled to leave their home after the earthquake because officials had begun evacuating the whole area. They were compelled to leave their home after the earthquake because officials had begun evacuating the whole area.
Kivel osztottad meg ezeket az adatokat?
Who did you share these data with? Who did you share these data with?
A Bibliát gyakran tekintik csak egy ősrégi könyvnek, mely idejét múlt tudást tartalmaz, de sokak számára a bölcsesség és útmutatás megkerülhetetlen forrása.
The Bible is often regarded as just an ancient book full of outdated information, but for many, it is an irreplaceable source of wisdom and guidance. The Bible is often regarded as just an ancient book full of outdated information, but for many, it is an irreplaceable source of wisdom and guidance.
Eseménydús napoknak nézünk elébe, amiket nagyon várunk már.
There are some very eventful days ahead of us that we are really looking forward to. There are some very eventful days ahead of us that we are really looking forward to.
Amit igazán csodálok benne az, hogy nagyon elnéző mások hibáival kapcsolatban.
What I really admire about him is that he is very tolerant of other people's flaws. What I really admire about him is that he is very tolerant of other people's flaws.
Ha nem egy multikulturális környezetben nőttem volna fel, nehezebb volna elfogadnom más emberek nézeteit.
If I hadn't grown up in a multicultural environment, it would be harder for me to accept other people's views. If I hadn't grown up in a multicultural environment, it would be harder for me to accept other people's views.
Az ellenkezőjéről próbált meggyőzni annak, amiről azt gondoltam, hogy igaz.
He was trying to persuade me about the opposite of what I believed was true. He was trying to persuade me about the opposite of what I believed was true.
Ahogy a régi mondás tartja, a tettek többet érnek minden szónál.
As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words. As the old saying goes, actions speak louder than words.
Bárcsak tudnám erre a kérdésre a választ.
I wish I knew the answer to this question. I wish I knew the answer to this question.
Robin olyan kivételes tehetségű mesterlövész volt, hogy lényegében képtelen volt eltéveszteni a célt.
Robin was such an exceptional sharpshooter that she was basically incapable of missing her target. Robin was such an exceptional sharpshooter that she was basically incapable of missing her target.
Ha csak nincs jobb ötleted, hogy hogyan takarítsuk fel ezt a mocskot, jobb lesz, ha letérdelünk és nekiállunk súrolni.
Unless you have a better idea about how to clean up this mess, we had better get down to our knees and start scrubbing. Unless you have a better idea about how to clean up this mess, we had better get down to our knees and start scrubbing.
Emlékszel a konkrét szavakra, amelyeket egy pár perce kértem, hogy jegyezz meg?
Do you remember the exact words I asked you to memorize a few minutes ago? Do you remember the exact words I asked you to memorize a few minutes ago?
Az általánosítások, mint például, hogy minden férfi fél az elkötelezettségtől, nem feltétlen igazak.
Generalizations like all men are afraid of commitment are not necessarily true. Generalizations like all men are afraid of commitment are not necessarily true.
Szerintem nem kéne megölelnünk egymást a nyilvánosság előtt, mert félreértésre adhat okot.
I believe we should not hug in public because it could lead to misunderstanding. I believe we should not hug in public, because it could lead to misunderstanding.
Néhány szereplő a könyvben csak sztereotípia, de sokaknak van erős, egyedi személyisége.
Some of the characters in the book are just stereotypes, but many have strong, unique personalities. Some of the characters in the book are just stereotypes, but many have strong, unique personalities.
Ami rád vonatkozik, lehet, hogy másra nem, és ez fordítva is igaz.
What applies to you may not apply to other people, and vice versa. What applies to you may not apply to other people, and vice versa.
Arra bátorították Philipet, hogy villamosmérnöki diplomát szerezzen, ehelyett úgy döntött, hogy informatikát tanul.
Philip was encouraged to do a degree in electrical engineering, but he chose to study computer science instead. Philip was encouraged to do a degree in electrical engineering, but he chose to study computer science instead.
Azokat a fogalmakat kellene először megbeszélni, amelyekkel még nem vagy tisztában.
The concepts that you are not yet familiar with should be discussed first. The concepts that you are not yet familiar with should be discussed first.
Az emberek egy része hajlamos azt hinni, hogy nehezebb a sorsa, mint másoknak, és folyton panaszkodik, míg mások hálásak mindenért, amiük van.
Some people are inclined to believe that they have it harder than others and complain all the time, while others are grateful for whatever they have. Some people are inclined to believe that they have it harder than others and complain all the time, while others are grateful for whatever they have.
Az édesanyja azt mondta Clarának, hogy fontos, hogy kövesse az álmait, de ez ne történjen a házassága rovására.
Clara's mother told her that following her dreams was important, but it should not happen at the expense of her marriage. Clara's mother told her that following her dreams was important, but it should not happen at the expense of her marriage.
Magazinunk idén tapasztalta a legalacsonyabb előfizetői számot, 3200-at, hogy pontos legyek.
This year, our magazine has seen the lowest number of subscribers, 3,200 to be exact. This year, our magazine has seen the lowest number of subscribers, 3,200 to be exact.
Nem kapták meg a hitelt, mert kérelmük nem felelt meg az alapvető elvárásoknak, melyeket a bank támasztott.
They were not granted the loan because their application didn't meet the basic criteria set forth by the bank. They were not granted the loan because their application didn't meet the basic criteria set forth by the bank.
Nem a hozzáértés hiánya miatt nem alkalmazta őt a cég, hanem mert nem volt tapasztalata.
He wasn't hired by the firm, not because of his lack of competence, but because he was inexperienced. He wasn't hired by the firm, not because of his lack of competence, but because he was inexperienced.
Tartozunk hűséges támogatóinknak azzal, hogy havi rendszerességgel tájékoztatjuk őket arról, hogy hogyan halad az új ugandai iskola építése.
We owe it to our faithful supporters to inform them on a monthly basis about the progress on the construction of the new school in Uganda. We owe it to our faithful supporters to inform them on a monthly basis about the progress on the construction of the new school in Uganda.
Évtizedekig úgy gondolták, hogy a nők nem képesek betölteni ugyanazokat a magas vállalati pozíciókat, amelyeket a férfiak.
For decades, it was believed that women aren't capable of fulfilling the same high corporate positions as men. For decades, it was believed that women aren't capable of fulfilling the same high corporate positions as men.
Nem láttam hatalmas különbséget a két ruha minősége között, bár az egyik kétszer olyan drága volt, mint a másik.
I could not see a major difference in the quality of the two dresses, although one was twice as expensive as the other. I could not see a major difference in the quality of the two dresses, although one was twice as expensive as the other.
Ha a munka stílusáról van szó, azt legpontosabban túlbuzgónak lehetne jellemezni a szó legjobb értelmében.
When it comes to his work style, it can be most accurately described as zealous, in the best sense of the word. When it comes to his work style, it can be most accurately described as zealous, in the best sense of the word.
Forradalmian új taktikákat használtak a világbajnokságra készülve, amelyeket a többi futballcsapat gyorsan megtanult és leutánzott.
Training for the World Cup, they practiced some revolutionary new tactics that other football teams quickly learned and copied. Training for the World Cup, they practiced some revolutionary new tactics that other football teams quickly learned and copied.
Érdemes megjegyezni, hogy az örökbefogadott gyerekek száma manapság óriási mértékben növekszik.
It is worth noting that the number of adopted children is dramatically growing these days. It is worth noting that the number of adopted children is dramatically growing these days.
Minden csapattag hozzájárult változó arányban az új üzleti politika sikeres bevezetéséhez.
All team members have contributed, to varying degrees, to the successful implementation of the new business policy. All team members have contributed, to varying degrees, to the successful implementation of the new business policy.
Személyiségünk folyamatosan fejlődik életünk különböző szakaszain keresztül.
Our personality keeps developing throughout the different stages of our life. Our personality keeps developing throughout the different stages of our life.
A gyermeknevelés sok felelősséget és kötelezettséget foglal magába.
Raising children involves a lot of responsibility and obligation. Raising children involves a lot of responsibility and obligation.
A bölcsesség egy olyan fogalom, amit lehetetlen egyértelműen mérni.
Wisdom is the kind of concept that is clearly impossible to measure. Wisdom is the kind of concept that is clearly impossible to measure.
Szerinted milyen szemszögből foglalkozunk ezzel a kérdéssel?
From which aspect do you think this issue should be dealt with? From which aspect do you think this issue should be dealt with?
A kormány nem is találhatott volna jobb módot arra, hogy ilyen rövid időn belül fellendítse a gazdaságot.
The government couldn't have found a better way to boost the economy in such a short period of time. The government couldn't have found a better way to boost the economy in such a short period of time.
Eljött egy fordulópont az életünkben, amikor rájöttek, hogy egy diploma megszerzése sokkal értékesebb, mint az, hogy állandóan a barátaikkal lóghatnak.
There came a turning point in their life when they realized that getting a degree is much more valuable than being able to hang out with their friends all the time. There came a turning point in their life when they realized that getting a degree is much more valuable than being able to hang out with their friends all the time.
A cég alkalmazottai mind egyértelműen a rövidebb munkaidőt támogatták.
The employees of the firm were all unequivocally in favor of the shorter working hours. The employees of the firm were all unequivocally in favor of the shorter working hours.
A dokumentum egy újabb fordítása úgy tűnik, hogy azt bizonyítja, hogy az autót tulajdonképpen eladták Brown úrnak, és nem ajándékba kapta.
A more recent translation of the document appears to prove that the car was, in fact, sold to Mr. Brown and not given him as a present. A more recent translation of the document appears to prove that the car was, in fact, sold to Mr. Brown and not given him as a present.
Néhány ember csak akkor kezdi el értékelni a szeretteivel töltött időt, amikor már mindent elértek, amire addig vágytak.
Not until they've achieved everything they had been longing for do some people start appreciating spending time with their loved ones. Not until they've achieved everything they had been longing for do some people start appreciating spending time with their loved ones.
A legfőbb motivációnk ezzel az alkalmazással az, hogy az embereknek kifejezések és mondatok meghallgatásán keresztül tanítsuk meg az angol nyelvet.
Our predominant motive with this application is to help people learn the English language by way of listening to phrases and sentences. Our predominant motive with this application is to help people learn the English language by way of listening to phrases and sentences.
Bár bizonyos szavakat mindkét nyelv hasonlóképpen használ, mondatszerkezeteikben jelentős eltérések mutatkoznak.
Though some words are used similarly in both languages, their sentence structures show significant differences. Though some words are used similarly in both languages, their sentence structures show significant differences.
A válás szélén álló pároknak ma általában két lehetőségük van, vagy külön válnak, vagy adnak még egy esélyt a kapcsolatuknak, és felkeresnek egy házassági tanácsadót.
Couples on the brink of divorce today usually have two choices. They either go separate ways or give their relationship one more chance by finding a marriage counselor. Couples on the brink of divorce today usually have two choices. They either go separate ways or give their relationship one more chance by finding a marriage counselor.
Összességében azt mondhatjuk, hogy a hosszú távú közlekedés leggyorsabb és legkényelmesebb formája a légi közlekedés.
Overall, we can say that air travel is the fastest and most convenient means of transport for long distances. Overall, we can say that air travel is the fastest and most convenient means of transport for long distances.
Ez a siker erős bizonyítékul szolgál arra nézve, hogy az energia és pénz, amit a hoteltulajdonosok az üzletükbe fektetnek, a vendégek növekvő számát eredményezi.
This success provides strong evidence that the energy and money hotel owners invest in their business results in a growing number of guests. This success provides strong evidence that the energy and money hotel owners invest in their business results in a growing number of guests.
Jó okunk van feltételezni, hogy az orvvadászok megkísérlik majd az illegális tevékenységeket rögzítő drónokat megsemmisíteni.
We have reason to believe that the poachers will make an attempt to destroy the drones that record illegal events in the wildlife reserve. We have reason to believe that the poachers will make an attempt to destroy the drones that record illegal events in the wildlife reserve.
Az elektronikus tanulás jelentős előnyöket nyújt a hagyományos tanulási módszerekkel szemben.
E-learning provides significant advantages over traditional learning methods. E-learning provides significant advantages over traditional learning methods.
Bármennyire könnyűnek is mondják, egyedül kifesteni a szobáidat nem egy problémamentes folyamat, és egy kevés tapasztalatot mindenképpen igényel.
However easy it is said to be, painting your rooms on your own is not a trouble-free procedure and requires at least some experience. However easy it is said to be, painting your rooms on your own is not a trouble-free procedure and requires at least some experience.
Biztos, ami biztos, kétszer is ellenőriztem a papírokat, hogy lássam, alá vannak-e írva.
Just to be sure, I checked the papers twice to see if they were signed. Just to be sure, I checked the papers twice to see if they were signed.
Pusztán véletlen volt, vagy előre megterveztétek, hogy Firenzében találkoztok?
Was it a mere coincidence, or did you plan to meet in Florence? Was it a mere coincidence, or did you plan to meet in Florence?
Legfrissebb megbízatásom részeként nemzetiségi éttermeket látogatok, és ahol csak lehet, magukkal a konyhafőnökökkel is beszélek, hogy a világ legnépszerűbb konyháiról informálódjam.
As part of my latest assignment, I visit ethnic restaurants and, wherever possible, talk to the chefs themselves to learn about the world's most popular cuisines. As part of my latest assignment, I visit ethnic restaurants and, wherever possible, talk to the chefs themselves to learn about the world's most popular cuisines.
A droghasználat egyik leggyakoribb mutatója a romboló jellegű viselkedés és a munka, valamint a család iránt való érdeklődés hiánya.
One of the most common indicators of drug use is destructive behavior and loss of interest in work and family. One of the most common indicators of drug use is destructive behavior and loss of interest in work and family.
A jóléti állam fogalma viszonylag magas színvonalon élő emberek jólétére és jó egészségére utal.
The concept of welfare state refers to the prosperity and good health of people with relatively high living standards. The concept of welfare state refers to the prosperity and good health of people with relatively high living standards.
Ha nem lennének állatkísérletek, a kutatók nem tudnának hatékony gyógymódokat találni a súlyos emberi betegségekre.
If it weren't for animal experimentation, researchers would not be able to find efficient cures for serious human diseases. If it weren't for animal experimentation, researchers would not be able to find efficient cures for serious human diseases.
A városi forgalmi torlódások csökkentése érdekében a hatóságok bizonyos belvárosi kerületekből kitiltották az autókat.
In an effort to combat urban congestion, city authorities have banned cars from certain downtown areas. In an effort to combat urban congestion, city authorities have banned cars from certain downtown areas.
Annak eredményeképpen, hogy kitelepítették az USA-ból, csak úgy találkozhat a családjával, ha meglátogatják Bolíviában.
As a consequence of his having been deported from the USA, he can only meet his family if they visit him in Bolivia. As a consequence of his having been deported from the USA, he can only meet his family if they visit him in Bolivia.
Nem lehet tudni, mit hoz a jövő.
There is no way of knowing what the future holds. There is no way of knowing what the future holds.
Milyen fajta szórakoztató, szabadidős tevékenységet javasolnál az újonnan érkezett nyári egyetemi diákoknak?
What kind of entertaining pastime activities can you recommend to the newly arrived summer school students? What kind of entertaining pastime activities can you recommend to the newly arrived summer school students?
Elég sok tényezőt kell figyelembe venni, amikor egy saját lakás vásárlásáról van szó.
There are quite many factors to consider when purchasing an apartment of your own. There are quite many factors to consider when purchasing an apartment of your own.
A lány magával ragadó személyisége a férfiak és nők figyelmét is elterelte feladatukról az irodában.
The girl's captivating personality distracted both men and women in the office from their tasks. The girl's captivating personality distracted both men and women in the office from their tasks.
Szerencsére a kár nem volt olyan súlyos, mint amilyennek először tűnt.
Fortunately, the damage was not as severe as it had first appeared to be. Fortunately, the damage was not as severe as it had first appeared to be.
Finnországnak bőven elég lazaca van ahhoz, hogy több országot is ellásson ezzel az alacsony zsírtartalmú és tápláló hallal.
Finland has more than enough salmon to supply numerous countries with this low-fat and nutritious fish. Finland has more than enough salmon to supply numerous countries with this low-fat and nutritious fish.
Hunter meg akarja kérni Anne kezét, de ahhoz, hogy ez megtörténjen, először romantikus környezetet kell teremtenie.
Hunter wants to propose to Anne, but in order for that to happen, he will need to create a romantic setting first. Hunter wants to propose to Anne, but in order for that to happen, he will need to create a romantic setting first.
A kíváncsiság az esemény nagyságát illetően vezette őt arra, hogy részletesen érdeklődjön a gálával kapcsolatban.
Curiosity about the scale of the event drove him to ask about the gala in detail. Curiosity about the scale of the event drove him to ask about the gala in detail.
Milyen előfeltételei vannak annak, hogy hivatásos fordító legyen az emberből?
What are the prerequisites of becoming a professional translator? What are the prerequisites of becoming a professional translator?
Bár nem vagyok abban a helyzetben, hogy tanácsot adjak neki, örömmel megosztanám vele az ötleteimet.
Even though I am not in the position of giving her advice, I would gladly share my ideas with her. Even though I am not in the position of giving her advice, I would gladly share my ideas with her.
Gyanítottam, hogy ír származású, amikor megláttam a lángoló vörös haját, de akkor vált nyilvánvalóvá, mikor meghallottam erős akcentusát.
I suspected he had Irish origins when I saw his flaming red hair, but they became evident when I heard his thick accent. I suspected he had Irish origins when I saw his flaming red hair, but they became evident when I heard his thick accent.
Biztosan voltak gluténmentes ételek abban az étteremben, de meg akartam kóstolni néhány tradicionális helyi különlegességet.
There must have been gluten-free meals at that diner, but I wanted to taste some traditional local specialities. There must have been gluten-free meals at that diner, but I wanted to taste some traditional local specialities.
A házasságuk elején visszafogottan éltek egy pici lakásban.
In the early days of their marriage, they lived modestly in a tiny flat. In the early days of their marriage, they lived modestly in a tiny flat.
A családi találkozó helyszíneként lehettek volna más alternatívák, de ez a tóparti hotel tűnt a legjobb választásnak.
There could have been other alternatives for the venue of the family reunion, but this lakeside hotel seemed to be the best choice. There could have been other alternatives for the venue of the family reunion, but this lakeside hotel seemed to be the best choice.
Miután jelzett a füstriasztó és mindenkit felébresztett, a hotel vezetősége sürgetett minket, hogy hagyjuk el az épületet, amint csak lehet.
After the smoke alarm had gone off, waking everyone, the hotel management urged us to leave the building as soon as possible. After the smoke alarm had gone off, waking everyone, the hotel management urged us to leave the building as soon as possible.
A város iskoláiban és munkahelyein minden jellegű diszkriminációt büntetni kellene.
Discrimination of any kind should be punished at the schools and workplaces of the town. Discrimination of any kind should be punished at the schools and workplaces of the town.
A cég vezetése nem tolerálta többé a dohányzást, még az arra kijelölt helyeken sem.
The leadership of the company didn't tolerate smoking, even in the designated areas any longer. The leadership of the company didn't tolerate smoking, even in the designated areas any longer.
Ennek a leírásnak konkrétabbnak kellene lennie a menedzser-asszisztensi pozíció követelményeit illetően.
This description should be more specific about the requirements of the manager-assistant position. This description should be more specific about the requirements of the manager-assistant position.
Az alkalmazás kiterjesztett valóságfunkciója egyfajta kísérletnek indult, de rendkívül népszerűnek bizonyult.
The augmented reality feature of the application began as a kind of experiment, but proved to be immensely popular. The augmented reality feature of the application began as a kind of experiment, but proved to be immensely popular.
Azokból az információkból, amelyeket elmondtak nekünk az ösztöndíj programról, néhány eléggé félreérthető volt.
Some of the information we were given about the internship program was rather ambiguous. Some of the information we were given about the internship program was rather ambiguous.
Ha nem hozták volna meg ezeket az ellenintézkedéseket, nem tudták volna megakadályozni a tűz további terjedését.
If these countermeasures had not been taken, the further spreading of the fire couldn't have been prevented. If these countermeasures had not been taken, the further spreading of the fire couldn't have been prevented.
Amint a munkahelyen töltött órák száma növekszik, úgy emelkednek következetesen a fizetések is.
As the number of hours spent at work is increasing, salaries are also consistently rising. As the number of hours spent at work is increasing, salaries are also consistently rising.
A társadalom szélén élő emberek vagy tudatosan választják azt az életvitelt, vagy, és ez a gyakoribb, körülményeik kényszerítik bele őket.
People living on the margins of society either opt for that lifestyle or, more commonly, are forced to do so by their circumstances. People living on the margins of society either opt for that lifestyle or, more commonly, are forced to do so by their circumstances.
Soha nem szabad a lázadó viselkedés fölött szemet hunyni, hanem beszélni kell róla és foglalkozni kell vele.
Rebellious behavior should never be overlooked, but, rather, discussed and dealt with. Rebellious behavior should never be overlooked, but, rather, discussed and dealt with.
Annyira sajnálom, hogy udvariatlan voltam, és félbeszakítottalak a beszédet közben.
I'm so sorry for being rude and interrupting you during your speech. I'm so sorry for being rude and interrupting you during your speech.
A közönség különösen figyelmes lett, amikor az előadó azokat a praktikus módszereket kezdte sorolni, amelyekkel a gyerekek monitor előtt töltött idejét lehet korlátozni.
The audience became particularly attentive when the speaker began to list practical ways to reduce screen time for kids. The audience became particularly attentive when the speaker began to list practical ways to reduce screen time for kids.
Addig csak boltban vásárolt fahéjas csigát kóstoltam, így őszintén meglepődtem nagynéném incsiklandó desszertjének telt ízétől.
I had only tried store-bought cinnamon rolls, so I was genuinely surprised by the rich flavor of my aunt's mouth-watering dessert. I had only tried store-bought cinnamon rolls, so I was genuinely surprised by the rich flavor of my aunt's mouth-watering dessert.
Alig emlékezett valamire abból az egy évből Srí Lankán, melyet gyermekként töltött a nevelőszüleivel.
He barely remembered anything about his year in Sri Lanka, which he spent as a child with his foster parents. He barely remembered anything about his year in Sri Lanka, which he spent as a child with his foster parents.
Néha csodálatos társ, máskor pedig olyan, mint egy zsémbes vénember.
Sometimes he is a wonderful companion, and, at other times, he is like a grumpy old man. Sometimes he is a wonderful companion, and, at other times, he is like a grumpy old man.
Mindenképpen megéri ellátogatni a város legismertebb zenei fesztiváljára.
The town's most well-known music festival is definitely worth a visit. The town's most well-known music festival is definitely worth a visit.
A mérnök kétségbeesetten próbálta betartani tervrajzai leadásának határidejét, így nagyon megkönnyebbült, amikor meghosszabbították.
The engineer had been desperately trying to meet the deadline of submitting his plans, so he was greatly relieved when it was extended. The engineer had been desperately trying to meet the deadline of submitting his plans, so he was greatly relieved when it was extended.